Seagulls can't wait to escape from their unpleasant bottom half position. But second place citizens want to dethrone Chelsea ladies from the summit. This is the FA Women's Super League. Brighton and Hove Albion ladies versus Manchester City ladies on Sunday 17 March at 2:30 p.m. Live on SABC Sport on DTT Channel 4. Also available on SABC Plus and SABCSport.com. Hashtag we love it here. Proudly brought to you by SABC Sport. For the love of the game.
Coming up on the book reading, Why Men Had Women.
Passionate or romantic love, instead of companionate love, sibling love, love between friends, parental love or godly love. A hating fiery love is, to be honest, a stable variety in the love song genre. There seems to be widespread cultural agreement that when it comes to this type of love, a risk exists for emotional turbulence when an individual is madly in love.
Catch the book reading on SFM Monday to Thursday at 11:45 on The Talking Point.
Blow your mind, not your paycheck, with real savings. Just like 35-year-old Danica, who jumped for joy when she saved 38% by only paying 749 Rand per month on her silver grey 2018 Haval H2 1.5T luxury. Why don't you see if you could save on your car insurance? SMS out to 30754 to get a quote. That's out to 30754 now. Our insurance is a licensed insurer and FSP premiums are risk profile dependent and reviewed annually. T's and C's apply.
The Talking Point with Cathy Mohlahlana. Weekdays, 9 a.m. till midday.
It's 9 after 10 o'clock. We continue the conversation on the Talking Point. Welcome to the second hour of the show. Coming up in this hour, we're talking finance with Brian Hirsch, and our emphasis and focus is going to be on the two-pot system. Brian will be telling us in a moment the amount of interest that there has been in the two-pot system. I was hoping this was not going to be the case. You'll find out why as Brian and I continue with this conversation in the rest of the hour. Some of you still responding to the conversation that we started in the open line. This is a message from Catherine. She says, we have a long way to go in terms of understanding gender inequalities in South Africa. There's still men who are offended by feminism and view it as an aggression against men, as if it hasn't been a man's world for the whole of history, and now women are just being nasty to men. Man up, men, even if it makes you feel uncomfortable. Man up and take the challenge and take the challenge to challenge the status quo. There are wins for you too in feminism. It's not just a fight for women's rights. In the context of feminism, men can cry, they can love their children and be affectionate, they can share the responsibility of providing for a family with their women. So that's just one message coming through there from Catherine. There are a couple of WhatsApp voice notes too to this issue, and others. Will take those before we get into our finance segment.
Let's have the conversation. WhatsApp voice notes on 0614 104 107.
Hi, this is Cathy. Good morning. Mrs. Cathy, I'm not sure if you're aware that the court proceedings for the extradition of Prophet Shepherd Bushiri in Malawi, it's actually underway from yesterday and today also with the South African witness. I think yesterday it was Sibongile Mzinyati, and seems like there was a sort of drama in the court yesterday. Can you please get update on this matter, because I think it's of in national interest, like the Yoguptas and all them, and why the Minister of Correctional Service and Judiciary, Ronald Lamola, is not even in there. And according to statement that I read on Nyasa News, the Malawi newspaper, is that the witness was alone there. So why is it there? Why is the state is not there? Kwena.
Good morning, Cathy. I like your point on the issue of women. I like that. That is true. Women have powers in their hands. So, according to me, the only political party that cares about them as women and empowers them, improve them, that is only ANC. I'm not campaigning, but that is a fact. The fact is something that can be proven, I think so. ANC is only good for the women, and it will be good for everyone, including women and children and youth.
Hello, Cathy. Cathy, speaking to Kanti in Cape Town. Look, when I look at the women, I always think that now that they are more than men, why can't they open up their own party? Just led by women only. Because if they have their own party and win the elections, then they've got power in their own hands, which they can use to change everything, instead of depending and hoping for change that will come from the men's hands, which is not coming. Now that they know they are more than men, the best thing I can advise them to do is to form their own party and contest the election. And definitely, if all women of South Africa join that party, be it black or white, then they will win the elections and lead the country for a change. Thank you, Cathy.
SAFM values your views. Be an active citizen. Talking Finance with Brian Hirsch, making sense of your finance.
Good morning, Brian Hirsch.
Good morning to you, Cathy. How are you this morning?
I'm doing great. And yourself?
Yeah, absolutely great. Still fully recharged. Lovely. And we've got a lot of long weekends coming up, particularly if you take next Friday off. Yeah.
Oh, thanks for that idea. Actually, I hadn't thought of it because the Thursday's the 21st, it's Human Rights Day.
Yeah. And then Friday could be a day that you could relax and recharge your batteries.
And you could also then have the Easter long weekend too.
Yeah.
Oh, some great suggestions there,
look,
Brian.
you know how much industry loses in the month of April with all these holidays.
How much?
Well, you can think about it. You've virtually got that weekend. You've got the Easter weekend. You've virtually got 4 to 5 day less working days. And if you take a 21 day, you cut your working days by 20%. And that's the cost to the economy. And the economy, as you know, we are struggling. Our growth rate came in. We just missed going into recession. Recession is considered, the technical recession is if you have 2 quarters of negative growth. We had negative growth in the third quarter, and we eked out 0.1% growth in the last quarter, which meant that we didn't have 2 quarters. But, you know, whether you've got negative growth of 0.1 or 0.5 or plus growth of 0.1 or 0.5 makes very little. We need a lot more growth than that because of our increasing population.
Okay, so now it's not going to be as nice enjoying those public holidays. Thanks for that, Brian.
Well, Cathy, I'd like to start off this morning with a warning to our listeners. There's a scam going on at the moment that is where you get a call from your bank to say there's a fraud on your bank account and there's a whole lot of action you need to take. And so many people are falling for this, even those that say who's calling. They give a number, they call back, and the person answering says, this is the particular, your bank that had already called you, and they start eking out of you a whole lot of information. I would like to give our listeners the following news. If you get any call from your bank about anything, put the phone down. Go into your bank or then phone the branch. Don't phone any number that you were called upon. Don't just reply. Go into your bank, phone your bank to find out if such a call. Because the scammers are really at it. I heard a case today where someone got the following, and I'll tell you what happened. They got a call from their bank legitimately to say that he got on his phone that 25,000 had been moved from his bank account to one of his beneficiaries.
Sure.
And because he does e-filing, no, not e-filing, he does internet banking, and they managed to stop it. But what happens is money's transferred to beneficiaries. Beneficiaries then get a call from the bank saying, this is the bank. 25,000 was sent to you in error. Please check it. The person checks it because they've now received it as a beneficiary, and they make payment to the bank account given to them to refund the money. So please, if anything like that happens, again, put the phone down and call and see your bank.
It's so elaborate and so sophisticated. Do these individuals gain access to people's bank accounts, or it's just pseudo accounts? How does it all work?
Cathy, there are just so many ways. You know, the scammers, these criminals spend 24/7 working on schemes how to get money out of our bank accounts into their bank accounts. And they sound so genuine, particularly when they're talking about a fraud on your account. You get a phone call today and they say there's a fraud on your account. We've managed to stop it. You're very grateful. You say to the person, they then tell you, now we have to close that account because we can't allow it. We'll open up another account for you and put your money back. And it's so genuine. And even if you phone them back, they will answer. Let's assume Bank A, they'll say this is Bank A, so they confirm the call to you from the bank. They've redirected lines. They are so sophisticated. So if you win a lottery, if you get told you've made money, please stay away from these, because they are the criminals are now getting into our bank accounts. And as long as you never give any information, any PIN numbers, the bank will and should refund you. But the minute something goes like that, the bank says you gave a PIN number or you answered an OTP confirming a purchase. Just be very careful when you're buying online. Check up, if you're buying online, who is the company you're buying from. And even if they tell you it's Takealot or Amazon, recheck it. Make sure that when you buy online that this is happening. When you're told to transfer money to an institution, phone the institution and check that the email you've got is the actual email, that no one's got hold of that email, and change the bank account on that email. Yes, we have to be far more diligent in our approach to ensure that money that's in our account stays in our account and not taken out by scammers.
All right, okay. Brian, that's such an important warning. Thanks for that. Again, because of how sophisticated some of these scams are becoming, it's important that we know, because that is one that many people would easily fall prey to.
We're so trusting.
Yeah.
And and we think that people who phone, banks don't phone. Banks don't phone, and if they are phoning, even if it takes you a bit of time and it's laborious, go to your bank, get hold of your bank. You know how difficult it is to get hold of banks today with call centres. I mean, we're talking about AI, artificial intelligence, and how much information we're going to have that's so much quicker. Well, I just hope our call centres start applying with a bit of AI, because our call centres are. So go through it. You have to go through it. Better to go through the process and check up carefully than to get scammed.
All right. Okay, Brian. So one of the other things on the table for today is, of course, the two-pot system. You were saying that you've been completely overwhelmed by the questions around the two-pot system.
I must have got, since the budget, 80 calls asking, what does this two-pot system mean? What does it mean to me as a contributor to a retirement fund? And Old Mutual put out a note some time ago, and I've got no verification. I only read it in the paper, and I'll just share a story with our listeners. Tony O'Reilly was a phenomenal rugby player for the British Lions. He toured South Africa in the 60s, and he also headed up all the newspapers in Fleet Street. And he came out of his offices one evening, and he didn't have a newspaper, and he walked across the road to a vendor, and he asked the vendor for a newspaper, and the vendor gave him a newspaper. He gave him £1, and the vendor walked off, and he said, "Hey, where's my change?" Guy said, "There's no change." So he says, "Hang on, do you know who I am?" And the vendor looked at him, he said, "Yes, you're the big boss of all the newspapers." So he took the newspaper and he pointed and he said, "Look, I gave you £1 and it says 60p. Where's my change?" And the vendor said, "Mr. Sir, don't believe everything you read in newspapers." So I share that with you because I read in the newspaper that Old Mutual expects 1 million people to actually apply for this two-pot system. Now, the two-pot system, what is the two-pot system? It's a system is to reform what will allow retirement fund members to make partial withdrawals from their retirement funds before retirement while preserving a proportion that can only be accessed at retirement to help improvement outcomes. So let me explain to you what this means. Now, if you're under the age of 55, you can withdraw from your retirement fund. If you're over 55, you can retire. If you're under 55, if you leave your job, you get retrenched or anything to do, you can withdraw your funds. The first 27,500 you'll get tax free, and then the tax bands going up all the way to 36%. Under the two-pot system, there will be two pots created. One pot will be the retirement pot, and the other pot, 1/3, will go into what is called the seed capital before the 31st of August. But the danger is once you go that route and you will not be able to withdraw on resignation or retrenchment the 2/3 that is now been set aside for retirement. That amount will only be able to be withdrawn at retirement. Understand that.
Okay, so I think that's an important distinction because, of course, normally if you are leaving a job and you've got some kind of retirement funding, you make the decision when you leave whether or not you want to withdraw that money, whether you want to put it in a preservation fund or whatever you want to do with it. So you're saying that if I exercise the option of withdrawing from my retirement funds now and I decide to leave whatever job I'm in tomorrow, I will not have the option of withdrawing those funds.
If you're under age 55, because...
Yes.
Yeah. Yes, correct.
So effectively you're using up your one opportunity to withdraw that money.
No, and you're not even able to use up the one, because 1/3 is going to be set aside in a pot, and you will be able to draw a one-off 10% of that particular pot, and up to a maximum of 30,000. So let's assume your retirement fund is 900,000. 600,000, Cathy, will be set aside in the retirement portion, and 300,000 will go into the two-pot system, and you will be able to draw on a one-off 10%. That's stage one. 30,000. Old Mutual have said they're expecting 1 million people to take advantage. Now, there's another caveat, another warning. The money you withdraw will be added to your taxable income, and at the end of the year, you will pay tax. And if you're in a 45% tax bracket, you will pay 45% of that 30,000 to the receiver of revenue. And if you're in a lower tax bracket, you could pay 25%. So if you think you're getting 30,000 once, you're going to pay tax. Now, the next, so you want to ask a question? Because
yes,
Cathy, you've got a good feeling for this.
Just on that tax issue alone, Brian. So if the 30,000 that I'm going to withdraw pushes me into a tax bracket above where I currently am without it, that means that I'll end up paying even more tax.
Yes.
Because it's considered taxable income.
Yes.
Sure.
So people need to understand. Now, the next component is future contributions will be divided into seed capital and to ongoing. That's where the two-pot comes. There'll be two pots. And on a yearly basis, so if you're contributing, say, 1,000 Rand a month to a retirement fund, well, let's make it 900 again because it's divisible by 3. If you're contributing 900, 600 will go into the retirement pot, 300 will go to the savings pot, and then 300 will accumulate, and on a yearly basis, you can draw 10% of that up to, with a minimum of 2,000. So again, that'll also be taxable. So it's not just saying, I've got money due to me. You need to get advice. And what you need to do is you need to make sure that you understand what you're doing, what the implications are of what you're doing, and you also need to make sure that you're registered and that your pension fund has all your details, up-to-date details. Very important, and I'm leaving this on one point. You need to get advice.
So just clarify for me, Brian, because you said on a yearly basis you can withdraw.
Yes, on future contributions. Because remember, the 31st of August, you'll have ring-fenced the value that's in your fund, and that will be kept in that two-pot. And now you've got another future contributions, and that will go into another pot in the retirement fund, all still part of the retirement fund. That's why it's taking time. There is so much administration that needs to be put in place. The rules of the funds need to be changed to allow for this. And every fund is it's not like one just change the rule, one rule for everyone. The law allows it, but the fund rule has to be registered. So yes, the future contribution, it'll be called seed capital. For example, if you have 200,000 Rand in your fund at the 31st of August, you'll be able to take out 20, and if you've got 750, you'll be able to take. You won't be able to take 75. It'll be limited to 30, and then the next process is that future contribution. So you will be able to get money out of your fund, but the danger is, whereas 7-8 years ago, when they were busy with the pension reform and the pension and provident fund contributions were changed and preservation came in, where you could not draw the funds, there was an enormous amount of discussion and that was postponed. Now with this two-pot system, you will be preserved. You won't be able to get your money when you leave. So understand that.
So just so that I'm clear, Brian, if I withdraw as of 1st of September, I've got 300,000. So then I can withdraw 30,000.
No,
right?
you've got to have 900,000.
Oh yes,
because
yes.
2/3 will go to the retirement portion,
yes,
and 1/3 will go to the withdrawal pot.
Yes. So if I have 300,000 in the withdrawal pot,
correct,
then I withdraw 30,000, right? So in 3 years' time, I then have, let's say, 200,000 in the withdrawal pot. That means I get to withdraw 20,000.
10% once off.
Yes.
On that amount of money.
So basically, I have the benefit of withdrawing on any new funds that are coming into the withdrawal pot.
No, that will set aside.
Okay.
Now we've got a new two-pot system on future contributions. So you've got the contribution that goes to the retirement fund and the contribution that goes to the savings account. It's that savings account that you can draw from on a yearly basis.
Ah, I see. Okay.
And you know, if you're making small contributions, it's not going to amount to much.
Yeah.
If you're making a contribution, just say again,
significant
if you're making a contribution, let's say 9,000 is going to your fund, so 6,000 will go to the retirement pot, 3,000 will go to the savings account. 3,000 times 12 says at the end of the year you've got 36,000 in, then you can draw 10% of that, which is 3,600 Rand.
But that is also going to count as taxable
income. And again, if your tax rate is 25, you're not going. So you need to think carefully. And if you're over 55, you can decide whether you want to actually go into the system or remain as you are.
All right. Okay. So it can be quite a complex piece of policy to understand. In a moment, we'll be taking your questions. Brian is standing by. You can give us a call on 086 000 2032. If there's anything you don't understand about how the two-pot system is going to be administrated, feel free to call us 086 000 2032 on the voice note line 0614 104 107. That's where you can send your WhatsApp voice notes and text messages. It's 10:30.
Good morning, I'm Anne Musa. In the headlines, the Electoral Commission has confirmed the dismissal of its employee who leaked the candidates' lists of the ANC and the MK party. The Commission instituted an investigation into the leak following the circulation of the lists on social media. Security has been tightened at the Manzini Magistrates Court in Eswatini ahead of the appearance of two men accused of the killing of Keenan aka Forbes and his friend Tibelo Tibbs Mutswane. And Grain South Africa has warned of a drastic increase in the cost of grain products due to the ongoing heat wave in various provinces. The affected areas include Gauteng, the Northern and Eastern Cape, Northwest Limpopo, Free State, KwaZulu-Natal and Mpumalanga. I'll have details on these and other stories at 11.
Taking a look at your markets this morning, the rand currently trading at 18 rand 63 to the dollar, 23 rand 82 to the pound, and 20 rand 35 to the euro. Markets in Asia closed mixed. The JSE is higher in mid-morning trade. Markets in Europe are also up this hour rather. Gold is trading at $2,176. Platinum $930 per ounce. The price of Brent crude oil is at $82.85 a barrel.
The Talking Point with Cathy Mohlahlana. Weekdays, 9 a.m. till midday.
All right, we're talking finance with Brian Hirsch. We've been focusing on the two-pot system. In a moment, I'll also be taking your calls and questions for him. 086 000 2032 is the number to dial. 086 000 2032. The WhatsApp voice note line 0614 104 107. You can send your voice notes and text messages on that line. So, Brian, you of course are a financial advisor, and in this context, you're advising me. Real talk now, Brian. Is this worth it?
Cathy, if you're desperate and you have no choice and you're not in a high tax bracket, yes. But you need to realize the cost of not being able to withdraw your funds in the event, and people change jobs all the time. So if you don't need it and you think it's a one-off opportunity and you think you can do better with that money in your pension fund, don't even consider going into doing this withdrawal.
Okay, so when you talk about and you're not in a high tax bracket, I ask this question recognizing the fact that the majority of South Africans are not sitting in the 45% bracket, because in this country, if you earn anything above 8,000 right through to 40,000, you're considered to be in the middle class. So it's quite a wide bracket that we could be speaking about. So which income category do you think will benefit the most from this intervention?
Someone earning up to 12,500 Rand a month.
Okay.
Because on 12,500 Rand a month, you get an 18%, you pay, works out at around about 18%, but you get a rebate or a deduction equal, so you won't be paying tax. So around anything up to 12,500, it's certainly, if you're in trouble, if you're desperate, if you're paying ridiculous rates of interest for unsecured loans or credit card debt and you want to get it out, it's yes. Anything above that, you've got to think very carefully about what you're doing, because you'll go into a bracket where the chances are you'll pay around about starting at around about 25% tax, and as I said, at 400,000, when you talk about 40,000 Rand a month, you're paying 36% tax.
All right. Okay. All right. Thanks for that advice, Brian. Okay, on to the questions now. So, incognito. All right, Brian, yesterday we kicked off the open line with a call from Anonymous. He got scammed by an individual claiming to be a prophetess, right? Belonged to a church in Naturena. He paid 100,000 Rand and he was supposed to get 400,000 Rand of a loan. Or I don't understand what the thinking behind this was, but anyway, that aside, he paid 100,000 Rand and he was told he was going to be advanced a 400,000 Rand loan for him to do whatever it is that he needed to do. Now, Incognito is asking if there's any way for this guy to get his 100,000 Rand back. And he paid it to these individuals that were part of this church.
Well, the only thing he can do is go to law. The only thing he can do is get himself a lawyer and try. But the chances are, these scammers, as you say, 100,000. I can't believe someone can be. But when any con man is very convincing. A con man, is a nice person, talks a good story, gives you all the pluses, never the minuses, and convinces you, and even may introduce you to people who have been successful. I mean, on a Ponzi scheme don't start because people haven't made a success. And, if I think about that, there was a very big one with Tannenbaum, who's now living in Australia, where serious businessmen made money.
Yes.
And so when people questioned these businessmen, was this real? Did you make money? They said yes, because they had made money and not realizing it was a Ponzi scheme. So if it's very simple. If it's too good to be true, then it is too good to be true. If it sounds too good, stay away from it. And I can tell you, I'm going to say this again. The scammers, the con men and con people are getting better and better at it. And more people are falling for it. So let this be a message to our listeners. Be very careful. Think carefully. And particularly the elderly who can't get to banks, who aren't on computers with banks and can't get this information. Be very, very careful.
All right, I've got another message here. Morning, Cathy. I know this is meant to relieve people from financial bondage. However, it seems more like an official scam. The complication, the tax, the possible increase to the next tax bracket. Thank you. I will wait for retirement. But just a quick one. Do I qualify to withdraw if I'm currently employed for less than 10 years with government? Or can I only start withdrawing once I have 10 years?
No, in terms of the government rule, I didn't know about a 10-year rule, but I think if you withdraw, if you work for anyone, and I don't know the government pension funds, it's not a fund I've studied, but in terms of commercial funds, you can withdraw 6 months employment, whatever, leaving on resignation, you can withdraw. Again, understand, withdrawal comes with tax consequences, and also if there's a cost to withdrawal, because what you're really doing is you've contributed for, say, 9 years, and now you're 9 years older, and you've got 9 years less to go to retirement. You take the money, pay the tax, and think you're going to invest it, whereas if you put it in a preservation fund, and Cathy, you explained that so nicely in your introduction early on. I'm going to let you come sit on this side of the table, because I can see you learning a lot from me, and you've obviously been doing, and I think you're doing a bit of studying. But if you want to, the place to put it in is preservation, and then you still have that right to withdraw. And let me also give another tip. If you're going to leave and you want to withdraw some of the funds, you're allowed one withdrawal before you preserve. But if you preserve the full amount, you're only allowed one withdrawal. So if you withdraw from your employment and then preserve it, you're still allowed another one withdrawal. So you can actually have two withdrawals if you do it cleverly. But again, you need to talk to someone who gives you advice. Don't just do it. Really. And if you're going to have to pay a financial advisor 0.5% of doing some work for you, it's well worth it than paying the 27 or 36% in tax and all the things that go with it.
All right. Brian, here's what we're going to do. We're going to take a quick break. I've got lots of calls lined up, and of course it's probably all going to be on the two-part system. So let's get this break out of the way, and then we'll address some of the questions from the line.
World Consumer Rights Day is celebrated on March the 15th. This year's theme is Safe Products, Safe Consumers, fostering accountability and compliance. Suppliers, do the right thing and comply with the CPA. Consumers, say no to unsafe products. We're about the consumer. Brought to you by the National Consumer Commission. Visit www.thencc.org.za for more.
Luton Town and Nottingham Forest are caught up in the same predicament. They both want out of the current pitfall. The Hatters want to dish out instructions at Kenilworth Road.
Great boy Morris! A captain's goal from the man with the armband.
But the Tricky Trees have different notions to grab vital points on an away ground.
Has to be a goal from Hudson! Yes! There we go!
This is the Premier League. Luton Town FC versus Nottingham Forest FC on Saturday, 16 March at 4 p.m. live on S3. Also available on SABC Plus and SABCSport.com. # We Love It Here. Proudly brought to you by SABC Sport. For the love of the
SAFM Sunrise with Stephen Grootes.
So what I don't get, Hanif, is why men and women should be treated differently. That's what I don't get.
We know that is your narrative, and we respect it, and you're allowed to push it.
I don't think it's pushing it. It's what the Constitution says.
We've already made 18 changes to that Constitution, so it is not the Bible, it's not the Quran, and we're going to make more changes to that Constitution, because that Constitution speaks to access to basic services, access to water. It should say the right to water. Access means you must walk 10 kilometers. So we have a charter of rights, and there are many other rights, like a right to personal safety. It means that you can constitutionally hold the security forces responsible. But access means that you've got to wait a whole day for the police to answer the phone, to send a van, and that doesn't work.
Hanif Hendricks, thank you, leader of El Jamaah.
SAFM Sunrise with Stephen Grootes, 6 to 9 a.m. Conversations that you connect with and react to. SAFM. Talking Finance with Brian Hirsch, making sense of your finance.
All right, well, let me go straight to the phone lines. Success, you're calling us from Klerksdorp. Good morning. Good morning, Success.
Yes, good morning, ma'am. And to the guest there.
Thanks, Success. Good morning.
Yes. I've been listening very carefully about this two-pot system and the pension. Now, what I wanted to find out is that there's a financial institution where it offers a product called pension-backed home loan. So I wanted to find out if maybe I go to that institution and apply for that pension-backed home loan, how does that affect the two-pot system?
It doesn't affect the two-pot system. Very simply, what's happened is at this point in time, and you've asked me an interesting question now, because at the moment, home-backed loans, a pension fund, the only benefit of a pension fund that can be used prior to withdrawal is for the purchase of property or improvement of property. And it's done on one or two ways. Many funds have relationships where you can actually borrow from the fund and seed your withdrawal benefit equal to the loan. In other words, let's assume your withdrawal benefit is 100,000 and you want to borrow 80,000 from the fund. They will register that there's a loan being made to you equal to 80% of your withdrawal benefit, and if you leave, they will obviously set it off. Other funds have a relationship with banks where they will seed your withdrawal benefit to the bank. You will enter with the bank into an arrangement to get a loan for the purchase of property, and if you leave, the fund itself will pay off the loan at the bank. So either some funds have got it registered, they've registered a rule to allow it to be done within the fund. Others have got relationship with banks. You need to talk to your HR department.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, Success. Thanks for calling in. Cyril, you're out in Durban. Good morning.
Good morning, Cathy and Brian. Thank you for this lovely conversation and the clarity. Thanks to Cathy for pushing so hard to ask Brian difficult questions so that we can understand how this two-part system is working. My question is, Cathy and Brian, if I'm on a Provident Fund, because I heard Brian saying, if you're using, I think you call it future saving, and then you've got retirement, he's saying if for whatever reason I'm getting retrenched or a job, he's saying going forward I will not be able to claim my Provident Fund, for example. I wanted to know about that because there's people working for government, there's us who's sitting on Provident Funds. I want to know the difference with regard to that one.
Cyril, just a question.
Yes.
How old are you, Cyril?
I'm 55.
Okay, because you can opt out. You can opt out. If you're over 55, the rules are different. Very different.
Okay.
And you will be able to withdraw as before from your retirement fund. You will not be limited to preserving that portion. It's only for those under 55.
Okay. Another question, a follow-up question. I hear you, Brian, talking about withdrawing 30%. I'm just asking, if I'm sitting, let's say I'm making an example, I'm on 500,000 or 700,000. I want to take around, let's say I need 200,000 or 100,000. I'm making an example. Is this new system will allow me to draw that amount, or is only that 30,000 that you've been referring to?
Yes, in your particular case, if you've got 700,000, 2/3, which is approximately 466,000, will go into what is called the retirement portion. The other 1/3, which is 233,000, will go into the savings portion, and you will be able to draw only 10% of that 233,000, which is 23,333. That is the amount. That is of the past values as at the 31st of August. But those older than 55, I think it's important to realise that those over the 55 can come out. They don't have to go into the two-pot system.
All right.
I can say that the implication are not. The implication of taking, I think, for me is not good. If I decide I don't want to take at all, what do I do?
Well, very simply, those members will not be included. You will not be included in the two-pot system by default, but you may elect to. Anyone over 55 may elect to participate should they wish to. They can do so they'll have to apply to the Provident Fund or Pension Fund should they elect to be in the two-pot system. But let me just say this: once you go into the two-pot system, you cannot reverse that decision.
Okay. All right. Cyril, it looks like we've lost you there, but the bulk of his questions were dealt with. Thanks for calling in, Cyril. Let's go to Tsokolo in Harrismith. Good morning, Tsokolo.
Good morning, Suket. How are you?
I'm good. Haven't heard from you in a while.
Yeah, I'm busy, Suket. I'm busy.
That's fine.
Yeah, sometimes I can't get hold of you guys there. They keep me on the line, so I end up not coming in there.
All right. No, not a problem, Tsokolo. What's your question?
Okay. Hey, Mr. Brian, how are you?
I'm well, thank you. Very well, thank you.
I'm well. Yeah, no, I've got only two questions, Mr. Brian. I'm working for private company, because we hear that this withdrawal is for only the government.
No. No, it's private companies and government companies. It's everyone is included, private and government.
Okay. Second question is it possible to withdraw everything that I have, or it's only that 10%?
No. When you say withdrawal, are you now talking about if you resign, or you're talking about if you carry on working?
No, I'm carry on working, but I want everything so that I can start afresh.
No. Whilst you're working, you cannot withdraw from a fund. You can only withdraw from a fund on retrenchment, on resignation, on retirement or death. Other than that, you cannot, and the two-pot system will then give you the 1/3 that will go into what we call the savings portion, and you'll be able to draw 10% up to 30,000, a maximum of 30,000 as a one-off. It's not, whereas your future contributions, you will be able to withdraw everything that's in the savings account. There is no maximum withdrawal limit on the savings component.
Oh, okay. Lastly, Mr. Brian, when can I start withdrawing? Because I heard different dates now. When can?
Okay, the implementation date is the 1st of September. And what you need to make sure is that your retirement fund has your correct contact details. This is important so they can contact you about the reform. You need to also keep out for communication from your retirement fund administrators or the trustees of the fund, as they need to communicate with members about the implementation of the reform. And you just need to carefully consider your options and seek advice from an accredited financial advisor.
Okay.
All right.
No, thanks. Thanks very much.
Before you go, I'm just curious. Are you planning on making a withdrawal?
No, not me, Sis Katie. Somebody else asked me to ask because I'm always on radio. He asked me to do that for him, not me.
All right. Okay, Tukulo.
No,
Okay, sure.
thank you.
All right, sure. Bye.
Okay, have a nice day. Bye.
I was curious, Brian, if he was the one that was doing the withdrawal, what he wanted to use the money for, because I think that can also be insightful, understanding where those that want to withdraw are planning on channeling these funds towards.
You know, Cyril gave me a question, but it led to another thought in my mind. At the moment, you can use your retirement fund for property. You can't withdraw, but you can either use it to borrow equal or partly equal, because obviously markets go up and down, but you can actually use it to give security to the bank for a housing loan. But if you leave, that loan will be repaid from your withdrawal benefit. If you 2/3 is going into the two-pot system and you're not allowed to withdraw, how will that affect people who want to use, as they have in the past, their retirement funds to obtain funds for housing? And I don't know the answer on that. Because today, if you've got 300,000 rand in your withdrawal benefit, that's your withdrawal benefit if you withdraw from a fund now, and your company, the bank's prepared to give you 200,000 advance against the protection that they will receive the money if you leave the job, or your employer has got a fund registered where they will give it to you. If you've now got this preservation, how will they get the money if you resign to repay?
Because they'll have to wait until you retire.
Well, I don't know. So I need to come back, and although it wasn't asked, I really don't know the answer to that. I certainly will come back next week with an answer, because I need to understand it for myself.
All right. Thanks for that, Brian. Tabi, so you're out in Wolmaranstad. Good morning.
Good morning, Cathy and Mr. Brian.
Good morning.
I'm very much confused, Cathy. I just want to understand. What if I'm having more than 30,000 in the saving pot? So I'll be able to access that amount.
No. If you've got 30,000, which is the 1/3, you will only be able to withdraw 10% of that as a one-off. So you would need 300,000 rand in the second pot and be able to withdraw 10%. That will give you 30. But if you've only got 30,000, you will only be able to withdraw 10% of that 30,000, which is 3,000. I hope that helps you.
Okay, no, it doesn't help at all.
No, but I hope it gives you the answer to your question. I know it doesn't help, but does that answer your question?
Yeah, no, I'm answered. I just wanted to know if I can access more than 30,000. So you say I'll only access 10%.
10% of the value?
3,000.
Yeah, 3,000, if it's 30,000. If it's 300,000, you can get 30. If it's 500,000, you can still only get 30. And if it's 200,000, you can only get 20. So it doesn't matter how big it is, you are limited to a maximum of 10% with a maximum of 30,000.
Okay, thank you.
And Tabi, so don't forget that this 30,000 then also comes with tax, eh? That's 30,000 excluding tax.
Okay, so it means that I'll end up getting something like 2,000 out of 30,000.
No, probably if you're paying 45% tax, maybe 12,000 yana around there. Yeah.
Well, I tell you, I do have some tax information. If you're earning over 22,000 rand a month, you will pay 26% tax. If you're earning over 33,000, you'll pay 31% tax. And if you're earning more than 50,000, you'll pay 36%. And at a maximum of 1.8 million, you'll pay 45%. So even at 30,000 rand a month, you're going to pay, of that 30,000, you're going to pay somewhere in the order of 7 7,000 to 9,000 rand in tax. So don't just go into this without understanding tax is going to come off it. And therefore, the financial advisor that needs to calculate for you what is your taxable income, and needs to not only include salary, have you got any money in the bank, are you earning interest, did you sell any assets in that year, is there any capital gains tax? So there's all calculations that need to be done to calculate how much tax.
Yeah. Cathy, I think it is better to wait for retirement because it seems like it's just a calculation games. At the end, the workers are losing out of that.
Yeah, Tabiso, that seems to be the reality. And remember what Brian told us earlier, that if you're earning anything above 12,500, then you have to think long and hard about it, because the full benefit, then you won't really enjoy the full benefit of it, because the tax implications that come in, they just don't make it worth it.
And Cathy, we haven't mentioned, by taking money out of your fund now, what impact is that going to have at retirement? Because that money's come out of your fund, you've lost out on growth, you've lost out over a long period of time of compound interest, so you need to understand what impact will that have. It's for people who are absolutely desperate, and those who are working can put bread on the table. Those who are not working won't be able to come into this because they don't have retirement funds. So I'm only making one comment. Talk to your company, find out who the pension fund broker is, engage with financial planners wherever you may be. We've had calls from all over the country, so engage with financial planners. Your bank have financial planners. Engage with them before you embark on making a decision.
All right, Tabiso.
Okay, thank you, Cathy.
We'll have to leave it there. Tabiso out in Wolmaranstad. Let me take a couple of WhatsApp voice notes for you, Brian. We'll take them one at a time.
Whether we are at the workplace, within communities, at school, or with our friends and family, we all need to demonstrate the kind of responsibility that we would like to see in our country's future. SFM commemorates Human Rights Month.
Hi, Cathy. I just wanted to ask something from Anonymous. If I'm paying extra voluntarily on my pension fund, if I withdraw what I've put in as voluntary, do I get tax for it? Thank you. Bye.
You can withdraw a voluntary. You made a voluntary contribution. It's in the fund, and I'm not aware that you can draw that money out. But any money you withdraw from any pension fund, there are certain tax components. There are certain tax-free amounts on withdrawal, 27,500, and then you start paying tax of 18% up to about 660,000 or 700,000, and then 27, and then 36%.
Okay.
Good morning, Cathy and Brian. Sure. I don't know if I heard Brian correctly when he said that when you leave your job, you're not going to get all of your money. I mean, in such an economy, how are we going to survive? Some of us, our contributions are too little. Imagine if I'm not allowed to get all of my money when I get retrenched. I see a disaster looming here.
Yeah, I don't think individuals, I don't even think everyone's aware of that. I tell you what, I will deal with it. I won't deal, we're not going to spend the whole program next week talking about it, but I will deal with it.
All right. It's 11 o'clock, Brian, so that's where you and I are going to have to leave it for today. Thank you, as always, and a big thank you to our listeners as well. I hope that if you've been thinking about these contributions, you're going to think long and hard, and as Brian says, make sure you get advice. You must please get advice. All right, that's where we leave it for today. Brian back with us again next week, Tuesday. It's time for the latest news. Oh, Brian, your number?
011 8804 Leave all your numbers, what your question is, where you're phoning from, because when I phone back and I can't find you, I do pass your message on to someone in your province.
Thank you, Brian. It's time for the latest news update.
Independent and impartial. This is SAFM News.
In our top stories, IEC employee dismissed for leaking candidates' lists, and 2 suspects in the murder of AKA and Tibbs appear in court. Good morning. We start off with election news. The Electoral Commission has confirmed the dismissal of its employee who leaked the candidates' lists of the ANC and the MK party. The Commission instituted an investigation into the leak following the circulation of the lists on social media. It says its employees' actions are illegal. Security has been tightened at the Manzini Magistrates Court in Eswatini for the appearance of 2 men accused of the killing of Keenan aka Forbes and his friend Tibelo Tibbs Mutswane. Forbes and Mutswane were killed outside a restaurant in Durban last year. Siyabonga and Malus Ndemande were arrested in the capital Mbabane 3 weeks ago. They are accused of the killing of 2 more people in KwaZulu-Natal between February and March last year. The Ndemande brothers face 4 counts of murder, attempted murder and conspiracy to commit murder. Grain South Africa has warned of a drastic increase in the cost of grain products due to the ongoing heat wave in various provinces. The affected areas include Gauteng, the Northern and Eastern Cape, Northwest, Limpopo, Free State, KwaZulu-Natal and Mpumalanga. The organization's economist Corneille Lowe has expressed concern that the heat wave and the shortage of rainfall in most parts of the country are likely to cause a drop in grain yields.
We will still have enough maize for the country, but remember that was 2.5 weeks ago. We haven't had a general follow-up rain since then, and the heat waves are still carrying on. So I would think that the crop is already a bit less than what the Crop Estimates Committee forecast was on the 28th. It can definitely be expected that, 1, white maize prices will increase. We're already seeing it in some way. And secondly, maize meal prices will follow.
Protesting eThekwini residents in Durban have blockaded parts of the city centre. They say they've been without electricity for days. According to the residents, this is linked to the ongoing eThekwini municipal workers' strike. The angry residents, who are also battling water outages, have set fire to piles of uncollected refuse. Officials in Tshwane say about 24 people have been injured in a multi-vehicle pile-up on the N40 near the R55 in Centurion in Pretoria. They say the injured have been taken to various hospitals. Tshwane Emergency Services spokesperson Charles Mabaso says a truck collided with 18 other vehicles in the incident which happened earlier this morning.
Highway is closed on the N14 direction north. We advise motorists to use alternative routes until further notice. The cause of the accident will be investigated by law enforcement agencies, and any change in the numbers of those that have been injured, if recorded, will be communicated further. Thank you.
Recapping the top story, the Electoral Commission has confirmed the dismissal of its employee who leaked the candidates' lists of the ANC and the MK party. For SFM News, I am Anne Musa.
Here, there, and everywhere. SAFM 106.1 FM in Bombela.
Introducing a collection of Audi Black and Urban Special Edition models crafted for the bold and curated for the progressive. From the sporty Audi S3 and elegant A4 to the distinctive Q2 and Q3, each vehicle has been created to be an extension of your identity. Style, design, comfort and technology is yours to own with a guaranteed future value and a competitive monthly installment through Audi Financial Services. Visit audi.co.za to discover more. After a convincing 7-3 victory against Bristol City, Brighton ladies now have a massive assignment to burgle maximum points from Man City ladies. The Seagulls can't wait to escape from their unpleasant bottom half position, but second place citizens want to dethrone Chelsea ladies from the summit. This is the FA Women's Super League. Brighton and Hove Albion ladies versus Manchester City ladies on Sunday 17 March at 2:30 p.m. Live on SABC Sport on DTT Channel 4. Also available on SABC Plus and SABCSport.com. Hashtag we love it here. Proudly brought to you by SABC Sport. For the love of the game.
The SAFM University Debate Challenge is back. Join us for the 1-hour debate on This Week Today with Oliver Dixon from 6 to 7 p.m. on Friday, 15 March 2024 at the SABC Gqeberha Studios in Eastern Cape. Rhodes University will take on Nelson Mandela University in what promises to be a nail-biting debate. The SAFM University Debate Challenge is an independent and non-partisan progressive initiative seeking to develop confident communicators, critical thinkers, and empowered global citizens. If you want to attend the debate, you can email info@safm.co.za. SAFM, leading the conversation. The Talking Point with Cathy Mohlahlana. Weekdays, 9 a.m. till midday.
It's 7 after 11 o'clock. Welcome to the third and final hour of the Talking Point this morning. We continue to lead the conversation. Thank you to all of you for the last hour. I know that there's still some questions that have not been answered, but we will try and do our best to make sure that there is clarity. For those of you that have other specific questions, please do get in touch with Brian. He's very good at making sure that they respond to the calls that you have. Well, our final conversation for this morning is around the political parties and the party manifestos. Almost every weekend now, we're seeing parties launch their manifestos, but do these manifestos actually speak to us in a way that we understand? Do they speak in a language that we all understand? Lorenzo Davids is the CEO of the Development Impact Fund. He joins me on the line this morning. Lorenzo, good morning.
Good morning, Cathy, to you and your listeners.
Professor Ntsikelelo Breakfast is the director of the Center for Security, Peace and Conflict Resolution at the Nelson Mandela University. Professor Breakfast, good morning to you too.
Thank you very much for having me, Cathy.
Well, Lorenzo, you believe political parties will lie, they will kill, and they will steal. There is no extent to which they will not go to try and make sure that they please the hostage takers. Who are the hostage takers in this instance?
Yeah, Cathy, the piece I wrote was really a reflection on the progression in our democracy over the last 30 years and the movement away from a citizenship-led democracy to a party member-led democracy. And that's a very dangerous shift in the philosophy of our democracy, in the building of the democratic culture, where parties now have you sign up to become members, and those members become beneficiaries of the party if that party becomes the state. And that's the difficulty. That's the difficult discourse that is happening right now. And so when people crowd into stadiums, when they line up to, get food parcels or whatever the next step is in that progression towards away from citizenship to party members, we diminish the vitality of our democracy by making people become party members and thus then beneficiaries of the state versus growing a very active, independent citizenship voice. And that's my concern.
Professor Breakfast, let's build on this idea, because I do think it's something that we've been watching in our political culture, that when people join political parties, they expect that coming with it, of course, is access to opportunities, certain opportunities that the party can make available to them, but also that there's a protection that they will receive as being part of that political party. They're really, in some ways, safeguarding the future that they envision for themselves and within the context of whichever party it is that they're joining.
Yes, thank you very much, Cathy, for having me. I also read the piece. I read it over and over again so that I understand the context and the arguments which are advanced. I think it's a very interesting piece. And I assume that our discussion will revolve around it. I think the central thesis or the main line of argument in the piece is that, voters are held at a ransom. They are giving away their freedom. They are not voting rationally. And I think one has a point there. But at the same time, I would say that, I agree with what also you said earlier on, that, people vote because they want to access certain resources. People don't just vote for fun. They vote simply because they want their lives to be improved and so on. But also, I think political parties also, they employ certain strategies, to make people be dependent on the system. I think that's one of the arguments that is being advanced here. And I would cite the issue of grants as a case in point, because the argument has been made before that some voters they will vote for the ruling party even though it doesn't have a good track record of getting the job done, because there's a fear that if the ruling party is dislodged from the helm of power, grants will not be rendered to them. So, on the whole, I agree with what the author says, but I think maybe in the bigger scheme of things, I would say, political power, in my view, comes from two sources. Mainly, the rural section of the population and the urban centers. And I think you do find, rational voters in urban centers, because in the rural centers, I think the people who tend to influence political behavior is the traditional leaders. But in urban centers, I think people in general, because of the fact that you have a large middle class, people vote on the basis of public policy issues and on the basis of the trends, in politics.
Lorenzo, let's talk about these manifestos, the extent to which you believe they're crafted to actually get all of us to read them, to get all of us involved in policy discussions, or are they simply written because they're part of a requirement that has been created by our political landscape, that, the parties need manifestos, but otherwise there's no true intention to have those manifestos result in real conversation about the quality of people's lives and what is needed to improve that?
Yeah, I think you have a very important point there. If we come to the 30th of May 2024, I can tell you this, that the conversations about manifestos would disappear. Parties will then get into the humdrum of becoming state or becoming opposition. And we will hear very little about manifestos for the next 5 years. And again, that is again my concern, is that there's no accountability mechanism that measures your manifesto with your governance or your opposition. We have all these sort of peak points in our democracy. So we have elections, we have manifestos, we have debates, but there's very little continuum that takes us into where we will be in 5 years from now. And so we're almost driven by these kind of adrenaline events. We have a meeting about manifestos, we launch them, we debate, but I find that it is slowly eroding the sense-making leadership in our democracy. So we get hyped up by something, and then we don't follow that hype with logical sense-making, interrogation, leadership, execution, and fulfillment of promise. And we are becoming a weaker democracy in terms of our interrogation of our own well-being. We simply go from high to high to high, and that keeps us afloat. And it's a concern for me, because you hear people saying, "Oh, I'm a lifelong party member," or I've been involved in politics for a long time. But that's not what this should be about. It should be about how citizens at the end of a process believe their lives have improved, they are safer, they're living in a prosperous state, the ideals of a prosperous state is advanced by what benefits and livelihoods of citizens look like at the end of the day. And so, yes, there is this concern that we get hung up by manifestos and events and regalia and T-shirts and caps and what you look like, and then it disappears after the 29th of May. And how is it possible that a country as powerful as ours don't have sufficient mechanisms that keeps that conversation going about, so what will it look like on the 30th of May? And I mean, Professor Breakfast, he's spot on. I've respected his views and still do about how you build this competent democracy, this prosperous state, and not lunge into this constant failed state post-election depression that we get to. And I fear we're going to get there again on the 30th of May.
Professor Breakfast, do you feel that we as the electorate also put ourselves in a position where it's easy to come in and take us along for the ride, and once politicians have what they need, they leave us again on the side of the road?
First of all, I want to pick up where my colleague left off, because I think he's making a very good point. And I mean, I'm paraphrasing what he said, that we need to bridge the gaps of accountability. Because if you look at successful democracies, and I'm not saying that there is a democracy which is perfect, but if you look at matured democracies, you will realize that most of them have strong, independent mechanisms of holding leaders accountable. And I agree with him again that in our country, we have a lot of gaps in terms of holding our politicians accountable. That's why corruption tends to flourish. So I think that is a very good point. Now, coming to a point, I think there are different typologies of the electorate. I mean, you have different types of voters. You do get rational voters who vote on the basis of media coverage, on the basis of the performance of the powers that be, on the basis of public policy issues. That's why, for instance, the ruling party, in my view, of late has been dealt with a blow, because one party dominance, in my opinion, is a thing of the past. But also you have sympathizers, who vote because of trends, maybe, or because they are not sure who to vote for. So what I'm saying is that you have different types of voters, but then the point that he makes is valid, that if you look at the rank and file, I think most of them, they tend to give up their freedom to a politician.
Lorenzo, you also bring up the issue of what you describe as a vengeful culture within our democracy. And for me, part of what that also speaks to is the levels of intolerance in our democracy. And I don't think as South Africans we quite appreciate, at least as deeply as we should, how intolerant our political culture is, just more generally.
Yeah, I'm very concerned that we have, over a very, very short space of time, become quite a disrespectful, insulting, and vengeful culture politically. I've watched other democracies around the world, and in what we saw the Trump era start in 2016, so you really began to see the ugliness of a democracy that is more than 200 years old, and you see that now in the UK, you see it in other parts of the world. But we've gotten there in just 30 years, where people are really, really vengeful and ugly and insulting. And the dignity that our Constitution calls us to uphold. In fact, the first line in the preamble speaks about respect for one another. And that's the first thing that goes out by the window in the current political milieu that we are in, is that people insult each other, they call each other names, they literally, advocate violence in subtle ways through their words, and I'm concerned about that the dignity of our democracy is at risk because of the abhorrent words used by politicians. And we again the reference Professor Breakfast made to the rational voter who picks that up and can distinguish and say, no, that's not good. But the bulk of our voters come from rural areas, come from, just given the demographics of the country, from a very low educational base in this country. And for them, those words, I think are troublesome, are going to become fuel for their vote. And they're not going to pause and say, hold on, that's not what I should be voting for. And so we are getting into a state where, starting with hashtags that's insulting, starting with, publications that people put out that is just crazy, and you can think like, this can never be who we are. So yeah, I think we've moved very quickly into a very dangerous, insulting, violent and vengeful culture politically. And it's going to come out in how we vote. I believe it's going to play a huge role in the vote and in the consequence of this election, the results of this vote. I'm more scared of what's going to happen again on the 30th of May.
Do you not think it's out of the need, at least of some people who quite frankly believe that, things have been a particular way for too long, that there's been good behavior and that has resulted in no changes. They've played by the rules and that has resulted in no changes. So therefore, then it's time to change the approach, because that through that then they might have a chance of actually challenging what is the status quo.
Yeah. I think there's two things that I have as concerns, or three things that I have as concerns. One is, I think we have a far too low energy Chapter 9 institution culture in this country. They are bodies that's supposed to hold the state accountable, and its political actors. They are far too low energy about the risk to our democracy. The second thing that I think is problematic is the fact that that I believe, the media itself should play a far more robust role in challenging politicians, especially on their utterances, on their comments, and not give them a kind of come and tell us what you think and then leave out the door. Have a view on that, whether it's building this prosperous democracy that we want. And then the third group, I think that's the third thing that's very important besides Chapter 9 institutions and the media, is the fact that we don't have a mechanism that again holds politicians to account successfully in the eyes of the public, in the way that the public feels this issue is being addressed. We can go through several examples and iterations of where politicians have said things, and unless you have the money to take them to court, you basically have no recourse. And so citizens themselves are beginning to mobilize, and I see it more and more, where they are calling for public debates, where they are calling for assessments, they are calling for engagement. And what politicians are doing is, I think they are avoiding that. They're beginning to almost skirt this public duty they have to speak to the people. And all they do is they get what, in my article, I call hostages to support their point of view. And independent voices, independent thinkers, even if they are party members, independent thinking is being subtly muted and eventually killed, because there's no room for that anymore.
Professor Breakfast, what do you think this is a function of? Is it as a result of the success of political parties in this country, that perhaps people feel that the only true way to bring about change is if you belong to a certain organization, because then there is that level of organization that is there, whether it's around issues, whether it's around ideology, that perhaps cannot be accomplished if one is standing by themselves?
Maybe you are referring to a particular electoral system that is appropriate for our democracy. On that score, I think, I believe in a hybrid electoral system. I think even the current one, I know now we have both the strong points of first past the post and the PR system. So I think that works for me because then you are able to pull together the strong points of these electoral system as opposed to having one, because there is no electoral system which is perfect. With regard to the issue of political violence, I think I've also made that particular observation that some of the violence that we have seen has been caused by statements that are unfortunate that have been made by our leaders. But over and above that, I also think that violence is also caused by the structure of the economy because of the relationship between the powerful and the powerless. So long as we have that challenge, I don't think that we can get over violence. I'm not promoting violence. I'm just saying that something must be done in terms of fixing our economy.
Lorenzo, you want to come in there? Sorry, I think you want to come in.
I just want to quickly comment on that and think. I think Professor Breakfast is right. I think that the whole structure of our electoral system, our economy, our state, it lends itself to becoming a violent. To a violent outcome, and unless that's addressed, unless we visibly see the embedded violence in the system, we again are going to ignore it. And that's why I'm all for a far more robust Chapter 9 institution culture, a far more robust media, and a far more robust independent voices to address that, to call that out. Let me give you a quick example. The elections are going to happen on the 29th of May. The overwhelming majority of the public do not have transport in most cases to get to polling stations if they are rural. That's a fact. Yeah. Now we know that rural culture, farm workers, taxi associations will say to people, this is an ANC bus, this is a DA bus, this truck, if you get on this farmer's truck, you can only vote DA. You're not allowed to vote. The system embeds that violence. And so you're going to see a particular outcome which is not fair and free and just. It is that if you want to go to the polls on that day and you get into that taxi or get onto that farmer's truck, you are compelled to vote a certain way. And nobody, I'm not saying nobody's talking about this, but we are beginning to ignore that and simply speak about people in the lines, but we don't understand that the people in the lines at the polling station are there out of fear that if they vote wrong, they may be killed or lose their jobs. And so we are naive about the strength of our democracy, and we are not open about this embedded violence that Professor Breakfast is talking about.
So what would we need to do to create a more equal playing field, Lorenzo?
You know, I wish I had the 2-minute answer to that particular question. I don't. I do think that by identifying the current weaknesses and points of violence in our system and beginning to address them specifically, we can begin to overcome these. We don't have to be confrontational about it or call people out on it. We simply have to say that point is a point of conflict. Let's address it. This issue is problematic. Let's address it. For example, I think that there should be a system of transport for rural people that is not tied to parties to get to the polls. Now, the IEC doesn't have money for that, and polling stations sometimes, they can't get there and walk the long distance back to their homes if they are sick or ill. There must be some way to address that. That's just one simple case. But our IEC doesn't have money for transport, quote unquote. And so how do people get to the polls without being told that if you get into our taxi or our truck or our bus, you must vote DA, and somebody's going to check up on you on that. So you have all these difficulties that's built into it. And as I said, we got here within 30 years of extreme conflict, where other countries took 200 years to get here.
We'll continue the conversation in a moment. It's 11:30.
Good morning, I'm Anne Musa. In the headlines, the Democratic Alliance in eThekwini says it's concerned about the increasing number of attacks on non-striking municipal workers. Earlier this week, the driver of a water tanker was stabbed at the Mahatma Gandhi Hospital in Phoenix. Tshwane Emergency Services have urged motorists to avoid the N40 near the R55 in Thatchfield, Pretoria. Motorists should instead use alternative routes following this morning's collision involving a truck and 18 other vehicles in Centurion. And the Electoral Commission has confirmed the dismissal of its employee who leaked the candidates list of the ANC and the MK party. I'll have details on these and other stories at 12.
The Talking Point with Cathy Mohlahlana. Weekdays, 9 a.m. till midday.
We continue the conversation on the Talking Point. My guest this morning, Lorenzo Davids, is the CEO of the Development Impact Fund, and Professor Ntsikelelo Breakfast is the Director of the Center for Security, Peace and Conflict Resolution at the Nelson Mandela University. We're reflecting on the political party manifestos, not necessarily what they have in them or what they're promising to do, but just the general culture that has been created in our political discourse. Maybe Professor Breakfast, let me come to you and see if there's anything else that you want to contribute before I go to the phone lines.
So David should seriously, consider, doing a PhD on this, because it's an important contribution to the body of knowledge, to ongoing debates regarding democratic consolidation.
All right. Mvusiwe Khaya, you're in the Eastern Cape, and part of the reason I'm taking your call is because I know that you are a loyal party member, and I'm interested to know what you think of this conversation.
Good morning, Cathy, and your panel there. Look, there's an element of this conversation that I want to labor on. And this has got to do with the point you raised a week ago on the media coverage of other provinces. An issue for me is how the media covers the implementation of manifestos post-elections. Take the current term, for instance, where the manifesto of the ANC was talking about land reform and agriculture. You look at the editorial coverage of all media organizations, the reporting and analysis of the work that has been done to deliver on that manifesto commitment. What you will find are three things. One, you will find, I'm not saying it's wrong to report about wrongdoing and scandals. That's important for the constitutional democracy. But you're going to find things that are about events that an MEC is doing this and that. And that is limited to what is happening. You will not find, for instance, the results of the implementation of that manifesto. When it's time for the State of the Nation address, people that are going to give you analysis of what the president is likely to talk about are not the people that have been reporting about that, are people that are detached from that editorial value chain process. It's not even your editors. In the case of the SABC, you will not find SABC regional editors analyzing or engaging on the issues that they've been reporting about. The issue for me is this. We cannot say South Africans want to hear only about the wrongdoing that is happening, but they also want to know what is being done to correct that wrongdoing. Equally, they want to know about information that will help them access a business finance programs, access education, access agricultural support programs. And I'm saying this, the media needs to broaden its focus. The investment in editorial personnel is one critical element in the discussion about the status of our democracy and the coverage of electoral manifestos, in particular the implementation after the election. So if the ANC wins this, after the ANC wins this election, how does the media cover the implementation of that? It should not only be at SONA or at SOPA level. It should be a daily thing, because those manifesto commitments are implemented on a daily basis.
All right. Mvusiwe Khaya, thanks for that view. Ntsikelelo, let me bring you in here on that one. What do you make of that contribution?
I think our understanding of political reality is as a result of what is reported to us by the media. I think, the production of public discourse is politically engineered. And I also think that, discourse is not meant just for fun, but it is meant to circulate a particular narrative. So it's good to hear people who are critical of the media in terms of what the media does, and so on. And maybe I think there's a scope to bridge those gaps.
Yeah, but is it the role and the responsibility of the media really to be at the forefront of doing that? Because again, much of the agenda setting, Lorenzo, is coming from political parties themselves. It's coming from individuals that are leaders of political parties.
Yeah, absolutely. I absolutely agree. I think that for me, one of my proposals around this in another piece that I wrote is that when we look at party manifestos for the next 5 years, that State of the Nation address that president will give, that must be matched to his party manifesto, and then year 2, year 3, year 4, and year 5's sonas must be matched against year 1 sona. We just listen to sona speeches every year as if this is new and fresh. It should not be new and fresh. It should be matched against what was said the last year and what the manifesto said in the year prior to election. That for me is fundamentally critical, how we do analysis in this country and how the messages should be portrayed. That if a president gets up in a SONA speech and addresses the nation, we should be saying, you're now in year 3, sir. We're going to see what you said in year 1, what you said in year 2, and what you said in your manifesto. And that's how accountability in the media should work, and not buy into the hype that keeps going with these events. We are destroying the integrity and depth of our democracy by latching onto hypes and not substance and intelligence. And therefore we are becoming so seduced by what we see in front of us and not what we read over a period of time. That for me is the big problem in how we structure the role of the media in building a prosperous and successful state.
Let's have the conversation. WhatsApp voice notes on 0614 104 107.
Well done to the IFP. Well done. He was correct on all 13 points. And preschooling, hospitalization in clinics, and also bringing back the death penalty. I congratulate you on that. And rest in peace, Prince Buthelezi. Thank you, Anonymous.
Good morning, Cathy. It's Mr. Suleiman. And good morning to your listeners. If manifestos that come out from different parties are to be implemented, our ANC as a manifesto, and eThekwini falls under ANC and EFF at the moment. Where is the manifesto? Have they lost it, or are they going to write another one? Because the people are suffering here without lights, water for days, some are for months, dirt not removed, everywhere it's filthy. Where is the manifesto that's supposed to be giving their service? I wonder. Thank you, bye.
Good morning, Cathy. How are you, Mafuta? Cathy, for most political parties, their manifestos are just rambling in the middle of nowhere with no tangible or practical ideas. I think, Cathy, politics has become one of those, or I can call it the goose that laid the golden egg for most people. It's a step up the ladder to personal fortunes. I don't think most political parties in this country, Cathy, they are really practical in their ideas. They should sit down and rethink most of the policies they put on as whether they are practical or not, Cathy.
SAFM values your views. Be an active citizen.
Sure, Professor Breakfast, the goose that is laying the golden egg. Is that what our politics has become?
Yes. I'm not sure, but anyway, I think there's a sense amongst the citizens of this country that our politicians have a tendency to make commitments and not honor them, and I fully agree with that. For instance, it's like I'm sure you were around in 1994. In the build-up to the elections, the ANC made a lot of commitments, but when they came into power, what we saw was a different kettle of fish. We were promised free education, this and that, but then when the ANC came into power, they didn't implement what was in the manifesto of the RTP, but maybe because they never knew the complexities of government, because when they were campaigning, they were out of government. But I think there should be mechanisms, just to echo the sentiment of Mr. David, to bridge the gaps of accountability, because the absence of accountability, I think, gives politicians a blank check to do as they please. And when you don't have enough mechanisms of accountability, I think you are making corruption to flourish.
I wonder, Lorenzo, if we as citizens and the electorate truly want accountability. Because what I've seen is that we talk about accountability to the extent that it doesn't involve the individuals or the people that we believe we support. But the minute it's accountability where there's a political leader or an individual that we think, no, but this person is a nice person, then the conversation around accountability suddenly becomes a shifting goalpost.
Yeah, and I agree, and that's because that's the main point of my piece, is that we are no longer living, thinking, and acting like independent citizens. We're acting like hostages, and that's the whole point. Our political culture has shifted from interrogating, dialogues, conversations, independent views, accountability, to being hostages sitting in a stadium or sitting in a community hall listening to a politician, and we've dumbed down the intelligent engagement because of potential future benefit, because of not wanting to offend the person, and that we are going to pay a very, very dear price for eventually in our democracy, when there is no conversation about accountability, but more so not about independently interrogating what is before us. We simply say, I'm a party member, I go with that. I'm a union member, our union votes for this. I belong to this association, we vote for this. And individual citizenship is dying, is no longer a currency by which we trade in our democracy. We now simply do groupthink, and we park our own brains, switch it off to hear what the group is saying.
Sure. Janus, you're out in Cape Town. Good morning.
Hi, good morning, Cathy.
Yes,
I think you touched a good point about accountability of all of us, of ordinary people as well. But talking about the subject, it's true that all the parties, they will have a similar policies. They will talk about similar things, like slightly different. The action. I'm a member of Action SA, and I was listening to what other parties said, but it sounds very, very, very similar. So it's not much different. But accountability and performance, that's the most important. For the last 30 years, ANC is trying to tell us, and sometimes, like when I listen to some people who phoning from the ANC and telling, they give us freedom, they give us this and this. 30 years of the democracy. And what we can, if you look, for instance, I'm encouraging the listeners to look at what happened after the devastation of the Second World War, what happened at the devastation after we recovered from the communists. Compare what happened in the 30 years. You will be shocked. We cannot be proud about it. So, but accountability of all of us. I think we also make some some things, like so even driving over red lights or, buying stuff which we know perhaps is going to be stolen. It's also accountability of us to not do what we shouldn't do.
All right.
So I think, yes.
All right, Janus, we're going to have to leave it there. Janus out in Cape Town. How do we begin to stop paying lip service, Professor Breakfast, and begin to act out part of that accountability responsibility? Very briefly, as we get ready to wrap up the conversation.
Yeah, Kitty, I think public participation and accountability, I think those are, the key markers of democracy, and they are control measures of a democracy. And I think, people should be active in their wards by holding their leaders, should, participate in, radio stations. Even this conversation also fits into democratic consolidation, and also use other spaces as platforms of promoting accountability. Democracy is work in progress. I don't think that there is a democracy in the face of the earth that is perfect, including ours. So I think we can,
Lorenzo, very briefly, your parting shot?
Yeah, I think that we are at a point in our democracy where we are at risk. That's clear. And unless we develop capable, independent, active citizens that engages media, the state, and Chapter 9 institutions, we are at risk of becoming simply a bunch of hostages that go to the polls instead of active citizens standing in line to choose a government.
All right, we're going to leave it there for this morning. Lorenzo David, CEO of the Development Impact Fund, and Professor Ntsikelelo Breakfast. He's with the Nelson Mandela University. Thanks for your time this morning. Thank you all for your contributions over the last 3 hours that we've been together. The Talking Point, back with you again tomorrow morning. Up next is the book reading.
The book reading. Please note the views expressed in this book are not that of the station. Listeners' discretion is advised. SFM presents another episode of Why Men Hate Women, written by Kopano Ratili.
The idea is that without our native need for each other, most obvious in the newborn's biological existential need for nurturance, there is no chance of biological life as such. And therefore, the development of our earliest interpersonal relations depend on the existence of others who care for us. This recognition of Botho as a paradigmatic and social expression of love, indeed of any relationality, emerges from the recognition of our dependence on others. When a person recognizes their need for belonging, which is to say the need to relate to or identify with others, and thus Botho, they are invited to treat others the way they want to be treated, to regard another person the way they would like that person to regard them. This will to interdependence defines humanness. It lies at the core of our connectedness to each other as humans. If it is correct that the need for others and to be needed is the foundation of being human, then the passionate form of love between sexual mates merely intensifies Botho. Similarly, if Botho entails connectedness, the sometimes intricate bond between parent and child simply magnifies the essential belonging with others. Because love is essentially what enables us to unfold our humanness, it would do us good to nourish it, for then we are doing nothing more or less than realizing our being human. We cannot then ignore love as the affective action aspect of Botho in the work we do or trying to lead boys and men toward better gender relations. This emotionally salient, liberating connectedness has a place in the work of changing the structure of society. It is true that beyond its survival significance, Botho is a practice as well as a moral and ethical value. Because of its ideal nature, the notion that being human is defined by caring for others and being cared for by them is not always true to life. Of course, caring for others and loving them are not the same thing, but the two practices overlap. In Sesotho, the distinction appears much clearer. Care is the same as being concerned for others, tsotello, and the word for love, lerato, means the same as it does in English. One difference between the two is, in psychoanalytic language, the amount of libidinal energy that attaches itself to each of them. And so, against the harsh facts of everyday life, of people's inhumanity to others, our botho is not always realized. Between the ideal and the material practice, we find evidence of hatred and exploitation, indifference and aggression, disconnection and isolation, even among individuals born into a culture within which the value of botho circulates. It is true, though, that for a value to lose its centrality within a culture does not imply that the value was never necessary or that it may not still be needed. It often simply means that other values have triumphed, that different values have displaced it, and reality may be ranged against the ideal. A question we can now pose is this: how do men in our society who have been brought up in the context of the frayed ideal of botho, a context pervaded by violence and an apparent lack of care for the suffering of others, experience this kind of hunger, the psychological hunger for affection? I would like to propose that men's deep love deficiency is in fact intensified because the cultural ideal of botho itself may have been weakened. If we admit that there is poorly satisfied love hunger among men, and if botho was the cornerstone of love in our society, in a time during which we witness high levels of men's violence, transforming masculinity would have to involve addressing their love deficiency and repairing the fabric of botho. Nordic critical masculinity scholar and journalist Jørgen Lorentzen has sought to understand the discrepancy between the fact that for centuries men wrote about love, and yet seldom was love taken into account in critical studies on masculinity. Is there any love in men's lives? Is love anything that interests men? And is it anyway an important part of men's lives? He asks. In response, he contends that, looking at research on men and masculinities, the answer must be a clear no. If it is the case that researchers focus on the constitutive and essential elements of the object they study, a review of the research on men and masculinities shows us that love is not at all an important part of heterosexual men's lives, since it is absent from the international studies in the area. Delve into men's love and you will discern intense personal vulnerability in many. Most men learn to cordon off their vulnerability. At the same time, because of this ongoing defense against emotional vulnerability, further digging into their weakly satisfying love lives reveals complicity with the gendered social domination of women by men. Belief in a certain ruling form of masculinity means men do not want to show their vulnerability to women because that would supposedly bring them down to the level of the feminine. They do not want to be seen to be like women, hesitant, yielding, emotional, soft, or whatever else is supposedly feminine. Hence, to probe men's love while keeping in mind men's violence reveals the dynamic interplay of male power and powerlessness, the structural and subjective meaning of masculine domination, and the fear of equality or subordination. When a man willfully hurts another person, power and its opposite, whether incompetence, weakness, failure, suffering, hurt, or helplessness, are always in play, refracting through each other. Men's violence is always a reaction, a reassertion or deflection. Regardless of whether a person realizes it, He uses violence to reassert power and to repel his sense of vulnerability, his own hurt and impotence, perhaps even a sense of hopelessness. More generally, power flows throughout love, now more easily recognizable, now less so, regardless of whether we are aware of it or not. Ultimately, power structures and animates all of our life of feelings. I grew up with the discourse of Botho around me, the hierarchy of needs theory I learned about at university. Even if I had not come to know of Maslow from the evidence of my own life, from the observations of the lives of those with whom I have interacted throughout my life, and as a critically inclined psychologist, I recognize that the need for belonging, for human connection, is a powerful, enduring, yet often underappreciated hunger in our lives. We cannot wish away that basic human need. The hunger for others, for their affection, and to be part of them begins from the earliest moment in life. It is evolutionary in nature. It has protective and social reproduction functions. But it is when we carefully nourish it that we see how it enriches psychological and cultural life. What we nurture is likely to grow, just as what we starve is likely to wither. It seems self-evident. Why then is it not obvious that men are emotionally stunted because they are starved of a nourishing critical discourse of love and belonging for their lives? Where is the discourse of loving masculinity in defiance of the patriarchal order? In its myriad manifestations, love is the sticky stuff that connects us to one another. If Botho is important to us, connectedness to each other, to other animals, and to the land is a defining element of our communities, at least that is what it was meant to be. Caring for others and the cosmos and being cared for by them were considered to be the beginning and the end of all human existence, at once the simplest yet also the most difficult human question regarding how to live with others. The value of care is the social force that counters isolation and violence and the primary socio-emotional foundation of a civil society. This suggests that the diminution of Botho is probably associated with increased violence. In light of these propositions, I'd like to put forward the second key idea regarding love and lovelessness. Lovelessness appears to lie at the root of some of the violence of men against women. The same holds for the violence of men against other men